Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to this first edition of the Art and Animation Podcast. In this first episode, I had a conversation with my friend Eric de Fromont, a 3D animator who went to art school in France and is now working at Studio Fortiche, a 3D animation studio that has worked on a lot of League of Legends related projects with Riot Games. They love to mix 2D and 3D animation, and some examples of the work that they've done recently include Get Jinxed, the Warriors Cinematic, the Echo Cinematic, KDA Popstars, a whole bunch of other awesome stuff, and what they're working on right now, which is Arcane. During our talk, Eric went really in depth about his experiences going to art school to study animation, what it was like leading up to getting hired at Studio Fortiche, the inner workings of the studio, and what it's like to be working there right now as a 3D animator on Arcane. He also gave some really cool advice for people who are interested in getting into 3D animation and getting their first job in the industry. So I hope you enjoy. So, Eric, let's take it back a bit. So, I want to get my facts right. You were born in France, right?
Correct.
You moved to the
So
US
far, so good. Indeed, when I was 7 years old, to be precise.
when you were 7. And
Yeah.
so were you always interested in art and drawing when you were a kid?
Maybe not specifically drawing. I would say this, ever since I was little, but I think that's the case for most kids. I had a creative lean. Had a creative uh, tendencies, but I didn't really get interested in visual arts until later. The first thing I wanted to do when I was a kid was be a chef, actually. I wanted to cook.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but then I realized you could just eat the food. You didn't have to cook it first. So that interest kind of waned off pretty quickly when I realized I didn't actually have to cook the food I wanted to eat,
Yeah.
which was the most interesting part for me about cooking. So then I got interested in more narrative stuff. I was really big into reading. So I read a lot of books, and I thought maybe I just want to be an author because I really like telling stories and reading stories and making up stories. But I quickly realized that the written word is not the way I prefer to communicate. It has its limitations, I think, in that you can't convey exactly what it is you're picturing in your head to another person. There's always sort of this limitation where the reader's imagination is going to sort of fill in the gaps of what it is you're trying to describe, which is kind of frustrating to me personally. So I turned to more visual type of art, specifically drawing at first, where I was like, oh, maybe I wanted to become an artist, a visual artist, when I do like drawings and paintings. But that also kind of didn't work out for me because drawing a lot of the time felt like it was missing the narrative element that had drawn me to writing in the first place. And so that's when I tried to find something that would merge the two together, which is how I got into comics, because it's the perfect blend of narrative, storytelling, and drawing. The problem with comics is that I'm not that good of a draftsman, and it ended up being not the path for me. So that's when I got into animation instead.
All right. Well, cool.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to take animation seriously and actually go to a school to, get a degree and whatnot?
Basically, I think my sophomore, maybe, sophomore or junior year of high school.
Yeah.
There was a day, it was like a alumni day or something. I don't remember what it was called, but basically, every once a year, my high school would have a guest speaker come in that was an alumnus, sorry, from our high school. And I think it was my junior year, the alumnus was Doug Sweetland, who, uh, as you may know, is the guy who directed the Pixar short Presto. And I think more recently he co-directed Storks, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
okay.
And yeah, and he kind of walked us through his path, like how he became an animator and what was interesting to him about animation, and it just really resonated with me about what I wanted to do. So that's when I got really interested in not only animation but specifically 3D. I had been getting there a little bit because I had a friend who worked in 3ds Max, and he was a lot more interested in visual effects and film, and so that was also part of my journey. But it was mostly sort of the presentation done by Doug Sweetland that was like a switch in my head and made me realize this is what I want to do. And then junior year and senior year of high school was mostly focused on me trying to find a school that would teach me that.
Yeah. And so you decided on a school, which is where we met and became good friends.
Yes and no.
If you were, what?
Yeah, I know. Plot
Or
twist.
did you?
I actually went to 2 years of college before Lisa, which is where we met.
Yeah.
Um, and the problem was the college I went to, I don't need to name it, but it wasn't very good, and the teachers weren't very good, and the software we were using was lame, and the computers were bad. I mean, like there was nothing positive about that school, so I that's when I decided to transfer, and I was looking at different schools, some in the U.S. because that's where I was at the time. Um, I actually I applied to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, and got in, but they were going to take me for 3 years, but it was too expensive, so I couldn't go there for 3 years. So then I started looking at other options, and that's when I found Lisa.
Yeah. And do you think you learned a lot from Lisa? Because there are a lot of students and people that, we've talked to who don't really think that it's the best school out there.
Yes,
Although for what it is in Paris, it's pretty good. It's obviously not out there like Gobelin, but people usually would go there if they don't go to Gobelin.
sure. Yeah. I no, I mean, I think it all depends of what you're trying to get out of it. Um, and then they do have a master's program which I can't speak for or about really because I haven't done it myself, but if you're interested, I could actually get you in touch with some people who have done it, and they could give you more details about the master's program. But for the first 3 years, I think Lisa has some positive stuff and some negative stuff. I think if I hadn't gone to Lisa, I probably wouldn't have continued with animation. I probably would have become more of a 3D modeler or something, which isn't necessarily what I should be doing because I'm probably better at animation than modeling. But I had such a bad experience in the US when I was at the university with the animation specifically that it kind of turned me off. And at Lisa, I met Benoit Lacoste, who's a fantastic animation teacher, and he sort of turned that sort of notion I had about animation around and made me really like it as I rediscovered it with him. So from that point of view, um, I I think Lisa was a good experience for me. I met some friends like you and other people there that I'm probably going to stay friends with for a long time, if not for the rest of my life. And people that are going to be my colleagues. So that's a positive thing as well. Um, it sort of there's a whole experience in the third year about your end of the year sort of thesis film that you have to do, which for me was a total well, let's not say total, but it was a almost total disaster. Almost everything you could that could go wrong in the making of a short film, I did wrong. So, but like even then, it's still like a huge learning opportunity where you basically discovered that these are all the things you shouldn't do. It just sucks I had to learn it that way, but at least I did. So from that point of view, it's still a positive. I think it's a positive. I have a positive outcome from that school.
It's interesting to hear because being in the 2D animation course, even if you have friends in the other programs, you don't necessarily know how it's going in the classrooms because you only
Sure.
see them, outside of class. So, so after
Yeah.
these, yeah,
Sorry. Go ahead.
no,
I mean, we could talk about Lisa a bit more if you want. I again, I'm speaking personally from sort of the experience I had, which was specifically with the 3D animation program, which I think is what Lisa is probably most well known for. Um, I, they have some 2D programs and game programs and VFX programs as well, in that category of cinema. But I think they're better known for their 3D stuff, and so I can't really personally speak for how it went for 2D and VFX in game. But like and it didn't go perfectly. I'd say I had some issues with the school, but overall, I'd say it was positive. So
I think they actually made a lot of improvements since we left.
ah
Because I actually met some people at work that went to Lisa before we went,
yeah,
and they had some stories of things that didn't go so well. That sounded a lot worse than what we had at the school.
well that's good. I
So I
mean,
think it's, yeah, I
yeah,
think
if it
they've been taking steps and strides towards improving the school.
yeah, that's great. There's no school is perfect anyway. There's always going to be certain issues, and as long as they're working to correct it, I think that's the best thing we can hope for.
Yeah. So after that, you did 1 year masters with
Yes.
Gobelin, and I would assume that not many people know that they actually do a 3D animation masters thing that only lasts 1 year.
Yeah, it's interesting
I mean,
because
I didn't know that it was a thing until you got into it.
yeah, it's very strange. It's relatively new as a program, which is part of the reason. And I just want to get you on a technicality before we go further into this rabbit hole because I don't think technically it's a master's. I could be wrong because I think they modified it recently, but for a long time at least it wasn't. It's just another program you could do for a year, and you would get some sort of certificate. But from a purely technical point of view, because masters is a term that like has some weight to it, and I'm not quite positive it's a masters, just
Yeah.
from technically speaking. But I mean the program itself is fantastic, and it is very interesting that it's not very well known. I think part of the reason for that is indeed the fact that it's fairly new. I think we're like the I was the ninth class or something like that. Like it didn't start too long ago, and
Right.
the other reason possibly is that it's not based in Paris like the rest of the Gobelin school is. It's based in Nancy, which is sort of this remote area that not a lot of people expect an animation school to be. Um, and it's a strange program because it's very focused. It's only animation specific, so you don't really do anything else. And the way it's operated is not like a classical school system. So I think that might be part of it as well.
Mm.
But they're
I think it's
getting more
pretty,
renowned. They're getting more renowned. So um,
yeah, I would assume that you learned a lot, even though it was only 1 year, because I think that's pretty awesome when programs go head deep into just one thing, focusing right on the animation and just trying to teach you as much as possible.
yeah, I think it's a really good thing to do once you're positive. Obviously, that is what you want to do. I would recommend anyone who's like maybe still in high school who hasn't really gotten into an art school yet to do at least 1 year of very generalist studies where you do drawing, you get into computer animation and computer software stuff, and you do more traditional stuff, and you do perhaps, yeah, I don't know, anything involving the visual arts, but you don't make a decision until you've kind of tried it because you can't know whether or not this is the best sort of option for you if you haven't tried everything. But once you do know that this is, and some people obviously know before. Like I met some people who know they wanted to be animators since they were 6 years old. So it depends really on who you are as a person. But for me, it was good to do a generalist school first. But once I knew I wanted to do specifically animation, Gobelin was a fantastic program to teach me everything I needed. Well, not everything I needed to know, but well, actually, yeah, everything I needed to know to get into the workforce.
Yeah.
And then, but animation is a continuously learning experience. You never stop learning. So I'm still learning, but I learned enough at Gobelin to be able to get a job. So it did work, I suppose, in that
It
sense.
worked. I was
Yeah.
wondering, were the teachers actually, industry professionals who were coming in, as they
Yes.
were working in the industry for real?
Yeah, that's one
So
of
they were,
the perks of the program. Yeah.
yeah. So they were like big deal animators and stuff like that.
Yeah. You had guys come in from all stripes of life and who had a bunch of different backgrounds, and they were selected sort of based on their specialty. So we because each the way the program works is each month is a different module that has a specific theme, and then so you work on an exercise for a month with with a professor, and then the next month you start all over again with a new professor. So for our second month, we had it was the body mechanic module. So we had a professor who worked a lot at MPC. His name was Oscar Carambano,
Yeah.
and he worked a lot at MPC and a lot in the VFX industry. So his body mechanic skills were just top notch, and he was able to teach us a lot on that level. And it's so much better to be taught by professionals who are still in the industry because they stay very current. They still stay in the know of things that are going on. They can teach you not only how to animate, but also about the industry and the way it is currently, which is very interesting. And it just provides you with an extra person you can contact once you're looking for a job. And if everything goes well, it also makes for a great mentor and a great friend later down the road. So it's good.
Yeah. By just to confirm, by body mechanics, you mean like acting and
No, so
or
that's yeah, that's what I mean when I say so the way the program is formatted is that everything has like a theme. So the body mechanic is basically all about sort of the way the body moves and very action heavy stuff. So you have to do stuff like making your character jump over things, run around, do tumbling, tough stuff like that. And when you go into more acting, that was a module that we had later down the road. And that's a lot more subtle. That's a lot more to do with like facial expressions and body language, and not necessarily about like how the character physically moves around, and more about why he moves around, I guess.
yeah. Speaking of that, I did just take a look at your demo reel
Okay.
and I saw one of those shots,
Oh, jeez.
the two guys, it's like a lip sync animation.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's always like whenever I see 3D animation, like you always see these small, tiny, detailed movements, like
Hmm.
especially in the pupils, when they kind of look down, up and down a little bit a few times before they get into the main movement. That stuff is like always is super interesting to look at. And I don't know, is that something that they teach you how to do like small details, but without straying too far from the main gesture of the animation?
Yeah,
You know?
I think it's important specifically in 3D. In my experience, there's this difference between 2D and 3D where in 3D you you have to the character can't ever be perfectly still because you have to like to give him life in some way, and in a way that 2D sort of does automatically, just the way the drawings are. It kind of just breathes life to the character without necessarily the animator uh giving him like micro movements or anything like that, even though he still can. But in 3D, you have to like sort of more intentionally think, because if you don't do anything, the character is perfectly still, and it's very noticeable. Um, so
Ironic, isn't it?
yeah, kind of, indeed. I mean, I would say there's a certain irony to it, but so what we have to do is really show the thought process of the character, and sort of doing what we call micro movements and eye darts and stuff like that is really part of the acting that makes it so that we realize the character is actually thinking and going through certain emotions and stuff like that. And when you shoot reference for your animations, a lot of the time we have to sometimes like either shoot another reference just of our face for close-ups so we can really see the expression, or just be very, very attentive of that part as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I almost feel like you have like a leg up on 2D animators in some way. Because personally, I've never heard anybody talk about that, or I've never really learned it myself, or just from watching 3D animation, that was the way that I started to notice that there are so many more small detailed movements than in 2D animation.
Well, I mean, we have to push, I think, the detail further because the 3D aspect of it makes it so it's just so much more unnatural if there aren't micro movements happening. Whereas I think 2D, because of the stylized aspect of it that you have automatically, it makes it so it's a bit more forgiving if your character is being in quotes perfectly still at some point. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think it depends. I think sometimes it could be a mistake to add micro movements either in 2D or 3D because it's just too much. And sometimes the eye gets tired, and you want to be able to know when to actually have your character be almost perfectly still, except for maybe breathing and stuff like that, so that the person watching can rest their eyes a little bit and make it easier to read what's going on.
Yeah. I hope I can find an example of eye darts one day in 2D animation. That
I mean,
would be,
I'm sure there are.
yeah, maybe in
The,
like Disney stuff or something.
yeah, I would look into Disney animation probably, or maybe I don't know some things. I
Mm.
it kind of depends. It's not just a question of 2D or 3D. I think it's also a question of animation style. It's kind of like what it is you're trying to do. But it's especially prevalent when you're sort of doing a close up on someone's face or something, and you really want to show the emotion of the character. And people have a tendency to look at the eyes a lot, like just kind of automatically as a human being, your instinct is to look at the eyes of another human being. So because that part is very focused on, we were taught to sort of specifically show a lot of of the thought process with the eyes.
Yeah, I've heard of the eye goggle rule where people watching a movie will tend to look 80% at the character's eyes and only 20% at everything else.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a video somewhere on YouTube. A guy did an experiment where he would literally track people's eyes. I don't know how I think I don't not quite sure how he did it, but he was able to track people's eyes, and you can see sort of like heat maps of where everybody is focusing. And it was affected by a lot of things, including the composition of the image, the way the things were lit, and stuff like that. But almost whenever there was a character on screen with a face, like almost yeah, like you said, 80% of the attention was focused on the eyes. A lot of it is also focused on the mouth, especially when a character is talking. So those are the things that we really have to be careful of.
Yeah. Make sure you animate those nostrils.
Yeah,
Gotta get it all in there, right?
it's true.
So after you did Gobelin, through much worry and anxiety, you
Yes,
eventually got an internship
I did.
at Studio Fortiche.
Yes.
So to get that, did you just do like a normal, you sent your demo reel and resume, like just a typical application? Because
Uh,
I don't remember.
yeah, I mean, I went through the regular channels, so they have an email. You can go on their website and found it, and you can contact them, send them your demo reel, send them your LinkedIn profile, your CV, everything you need, everything that they need to know who you are, basically. But I'm not gonna pretend it was only that. I think there was also, I mean, I'm not. I think I know there was a certain aid in having had teachers at Gobelin who work at Fortiche, so they already knew me a little bit, and they could sort of speak to my good character and be like, yeah, this guy is nice, he's a hard worker, so if you take him on as an intern, he'll probably not cause any trouble, I guess, is what they said. And as soon as you were able to become I was able to become an intern there. and actually sort of apply myself and learn from animators there as well. They offered me a job. So
Did they critique your demo reel at all, or did they just say, "Cool, you're hired," and then you were on the
uh
team?
no, I didn't get critiques from them, but because it was sort of the process was fairly smooth. I mean, we got taken on as interns. Um, so at first it was we were giving sort of tasks to do, such as walk cycles and working on small shots and stuff like that. And then they were focusing mainly on, and basically the difference is like, because sometimes animation style is different, and the time you have to do something is different. So they would rather sort of critique the work we did as interns or as first time workers there than the work we did for our demo reels, because they have no idea how long it took us to do that or how much help we had. And sometimes the style doesn't even correspond, so it's not necessarily in their best interest. If they can realize that we have the principles down and that we understand the basic fundamentals of animation, I don't think they need to critique. Critique is more for if you're doing an interview and you're showing your demo reel on the spot, which is not what happened with Fortiche, or if you're asking for a specific critique from someone.
Mm. So you've been working officially as an actual contracted animator for 8 months
Uh, I
around?
started I started in October, so do the math. October, November, December. No, it's more like five,
Okay. How
because
many
I was
months were you an intern for?
uh, three. July, August, September. Yeah, 3 months.
Mm.
It was
Was
supposed
that
to be a
on?
2 month internship at first, and then they added an extra month.
So you were on Arcane the whole time?
Yes.
So is the whole Arcane show animated by Fortiche?
Yes. The so far all the animation for the show has been done in house. Not just the animation actually. The whole project from anything that's visually based anyway has been done by Feltish.
Cool. So there are a lot of roles in your studio then, like not just 3D animators. You also have like prop designers and compositors and all that stuff,
Yeah,
or
yeah, it's a fairly big studio. I think maybe Illumination and like Ubisoft are two bigger studios when it comes to 3D animation. But besides that, we have one of the biggest studios in France, and we have all the departments, from concept design to modeling, sculpting, rigging, uh, animation, obviously, VFX, all of it. I actually just met a girl today. I haven't had time to meet everyone because it's a bigger studio, but I met a girl today who works specifically in the Groom department. So we have a whole team. I don't know how many people there are in it, but we have a whole team that's comprised of people whose only job it is to do the character's hair from scene to scene.
oh
So
yeah, that's cool. I didn't know it was that big,
yeah, well,
honestly.
it grew a lot in the past couple of months actually. Because when we got on as interns last July, I think it was maybe 200, and now I think we're close to 300. So
Hmm. So there are 2D artists in your studio.
yeah, for sure. Concept
Yes.
artists, texture artists, and then Feltich's style is particular where they do all of their effects in 2D. So anything
Yeah.
that's smoke, water, fire, a lot of debris can be done, electricity, anything like that is done in 2D, and it gives the studio its signature look, I guess. And you can look at all the not all, but a lot of the works that they've done in the past, and that you can see that sort of faultish style on it.
Yeah, every time I see that, it makes me a bit happy because Riot, they like to make, they like to mix 2D and 3D in all of their shows and stuff.
Yeah.
Even in the trailer, there was like a smoke animation coming out the window,
Yep.
little smoke explosion in 2D, and it always looks super nice. So when you get like documents and stuff, Do you see like the Riot Games logo on there?
Do I? No, I don't think I mean I don't deal with with actual documents very often. The way the system works is I'm in a team and they give us shots to work on and we work on them. So we don't necessarily get to see the whole process. By the time it gets to us, it's been storyboarded and there's been a passive 3D layout already. So we usually base ourselves off of that, and it's very rare that we go look at the concepts for anything other than just to maybe get an idea what our character is going to act like if we want. But typically, the riot stuff happens way before it gets to our team.
Yeah. So it sounds like the process of making an episode for you is pretty similar to in my 2D animation studio. Like you've got the storyboard. Uh, do you get shots distributed to every animator,
Yep.
and then you do the shot, and then do you check it with like a lead animator
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
something?
Same,
Yeah.
same organizational structure. I think is it's pretty similar across almost all animation
Yeah.
studios.
Cool.
The one difference perhaps from the way you guys do it, and that's probably because of the nature of the projects we're working on, they're a bit different. But I'm actually in the animation team that's known as the extra team. So animators are divided into teams that each directed by a lead, and then the team is usually comprised of one or maybe two seniors, and a couple of mid-level animators, and a couple of junior-level animators. And then we have the extras team, which is the same sort of organizational structure, but we don't actually work on specific sequences or shots. What we do is we animate all the secondary characters that are in the background. We work on characters that are, well, as the name implies, are basically the equivalent of extras in a live action movie.
Yeah.
And then sometimes if there's need and they think we can handle it, we're given a smaller sequence and we can actually animate what we call main characters. But it
Is that
depends.
is that sort of a moving up the ladder type of thing where once you get more experience and whatnot, they'll give you cooler and cooler shots to animate?
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's part of it. Usually the extra team, not always, kind of depends. But the way it works is a sort of a launch pad, I guess, where you start off at Fortiche there, especially if you're a beginner like me, and you sort of you get used to working in the studio, and you get a little bit better at animating, and then once you're good enough level, you get transferred into a main animation team instead of an extra.
So, what kind of references do you get for 3D animation exactly? Like, do you get references for the characters, or if they have some kind of personality that they have to show, even if they're in the background? Do you get any stuff for that?
Yeah, it depends. So if we're animating main characters, there's already sort of a library, a backlog of references from other shots that have been animated and how the characters should act and stuff like that. And the directors have a very specific idea of what they want the characters to be like. Then also a lot of the time we'll be provided with movie references. So we can, like, if this character is kind of a mix between this guy from this movie and this guy from this other movie, and sprinkle in some third guy or whatever, and then we take those and we try to think about how the way the character is going to be. Then we shoot our own references a lot of the time, specific to the shot. So even for extras, we do this. So the character has a specific action that he needs to do. So we're going to shoot a reference of ourselves doing that action, which not only helps you yourself understand um, what the action is supposed to be, but also it makes you sort of think about how the character is supposed to do it. And then we animate it, we show it to the animation director, and he tells us whether or not it's, basically what he had in mind, and if it is, then we can refine the animation, and if it isn't, then we start over with a new reference.
Retakes.
Retakes, lots
Retakes.
of retakes.
Everyone's favorite.
it's how you learn. So
Yep.
it's important.
So when an episode gets done, it all gets composited in your studio. So
Yeah.
basically, it gets finished within your studio, right?
Yes, I'm not quite sure how much I'm allowed to talk about it, but I think as long as I
Yeah.
don't give any details about the story, it should be fine. Basically, we don't have anything to do with the sound aspect of it. So, like sound design and music isn't done in at Fortiche. It's
Hmm.
done by other studios. But when it comes to visual stuff, we do everything from A to Z. So.
I'm. I. You gotta. I can't wait till it comes out and I can watch a scene and know like, this is the scene that he animated. It's
Well,
gonna
yeah,
be really cool. Do
a
you
lot
know?
of the a lot of the scenes I've worked on are mostly are I've worked on the secondary characters. So I mean it's the nature of the job, but sometimes it can be a little frustrating where you work on a character for like a or a shot. You can work on it for like a week, and then when it gets composited with lights and rendering and everything, and because your characters aren't the main focus of the shot, they ended up being sort of out of focus or in the shadow or covered up by dust or something like that. And you just spend lots and lots of time working on something that eventually nobody is gonna even notice. But it's important for it to be there
Yeah.
anyway, because if it weren't, then people might think something is off. So it's an important job. It's just sometimes a little a little frustrating, you realize, but
Yeah.
it is what
But
it is.
that's kind of a fundamental issue, I guess, with working on something that's not your own project. Like, you're there to, advance the project and not
Yeah,
necessarily go crazy with your own stuff or anything like that.
of course, and I think it's important to have your own personal creative outlet on the side because even and I'm very lucky and I recognize this because Fartish is an amazing studio and the project we're working on is something very interesting. So like creatively, I'm actually fairly satisfied already. But I think it's always interesting and a good idea to have your own personal projects on the side as well, just so you can
Yeah. Have your shots at least been interesting shots in terms of character acting or whatever?
Yeah, I've had some interesting stuff where I had to sort of confront things I wouldn't have had to confront in sort of a school setting because you don't really think about doing it or it's you don't really know how. I had to work on a shot where things go from normal speed to slow motion, for example, and I'd never done that before, so that was a really good learning experience for me, like learning how to animate slow motion and really focus on the body mechanic stuff because when you're doing stuff in slow motion, obviously, if it's wrong, it's very easily noticeable. So
Yeah. So you do your own work after your own work after work?
sometime, yeah, it depends. I don't do a lot of animation right now because I've kind of had my fill, honestly. But
Yeah.
I'm interested in all aspects of the 3D pipeline. I suppose you could say. So I've been actually getting interested in Blender recently, and the software Blender and its capacities, because it's a free software. It's actually pretty powerful. So I'm trying to learn a bit more about modeling and rendering and stuff like that, so I can do more personal stuff.
Do you learn a lot by yourself as opposed to at work? Like, how much
I
do you learn at work versus when you're by yourself at home working on your own projects?
I would say I learn perhaps the same amount. It's just it's different when I'm by myself. It's very much more a scattered type of learning because it kind of depends on the day to day what it is I'm interested in. And since I don't have any deadlines or any focused goals right now, I'm just or like feeling my way around this new software. I'm learning a lot, but it's pretty scatterbrained type of learning. Whereas at work, it's the learning I'm doing is a lot more focused, and I don't necessarily realize how much I've learned until I come back in the next day and I see a lot of problems with my shot I didn't see the day before. I mean, just because sometimes when you have your head in something, you don't really notice what's wrong. But it was Yeah, I'd say I don't think I would learn. I'd say I learn more or less at home or at work. It's just it's a different type, and different amount.
Mm. So what's the most difficult thing that you've encountered at your 3D animation job,
Difficult thing.
if
How
anything?
so?
Like, what would you say is the most difficult thing about 3D animation for you?
Um, I think honestly, um, something I've had a bit of trouble confronting before starting this job, and I'm trying to get better at, is just meeting deadlines. So it's not necessarily anything to do with the craft itself, even though I have some difficulties there as well. But it's just um, having to bring your animation to the level of quality that they're asking for, which is a very high level of quality, and doing
Yeah.
that specifically within the deadline that you're given, which can sometimes feel a bit short. It depends on obviously it's because I'm new, because honestly the quotas are not all that bad compared to certain other studios. But yeah, working with a specific deadline has been something that I've been a bit struggling with, but I'm getting better at it. So at least I hope.
So, if you're allowed to say, what is your quota?
To focus on this project, I think if I'm not saying something dumb, I believe it is about a second a day.
Okay. Of completed animation?
Yeah, of completed. So you go through the blocking, you go through the spline, you go through the polish, all the different steps that you go through in 3D animation, and each
Yeah.
time you have to get it. Not each time, but usually before each you can go to the next step. Like before you can move from blocking to spline or from spline to polish, you have to get the animation approved by the animation director.
Yeah.
So
Well, mine is 8 seconds a day.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
I'm aware.
I'm not implying anything. That's just,
No. Some studios
no, I'm
ask for a
kidding.
lot more. Um, Out of the animators. So I'm not complaining about the quotas. I have never had to do them before. So that's just it. So
I mean, that's pretty crazy though. 1 second a day, that shows the scope of the scale of the project, because
yeah,
that's
yeah,
barely
yeah.
anything.
It's barely anything, but then you have to also keep in mind, not necessarily to bash on other projects, but like the quality of animation on a sort of a children's TV show can sometimes be a bit more simplified than you would get
Oh
on
yeah,
a project like Arcane. So
yeah. So on the flip side, what's your favorite thing about 3D animation?
I think that's a good question. I'm not quite sure I have a specific favorite thing. Personally, I love the idea process behind it. I'm not very good at when it comes to actually polishing or splining the animation. Not necessarily that I'm not very good at it, but it's not the part that I like the most. I like the very creative aspect that you get at the very beginning, where you sort of take the decisions that are gonna make your character come to life in a particular way. So it's the part where you say, "Oh, my character is going to sort of look in this direction and react like this and do this and this," and then sort of almost you could say the theoretical part of it, and then the application part is the part that I still enjoy very much. It's just I enjoy it a bit less, I guess, than actually getting the idea.
Yeah. So the only the last things that I wanted to ask, which are kind of harder questions maybe, but is there any advice that anyone gave you, whether it be from a teacher or somebody, one of your coworkers, that really helped you improve your 3D animation?
I
Any tips or anything like that? It could be something totally specific, like, make sure your eyes are looking here on your character at this specific moment, or
Sure.
something like that.
I think no, I don't think there's anything super specific like that. I think some one good advice is emotion takes time, um, which is super general, but it's something you really have to realize is if you want your characters to feel alive and like they're thinking and feeling things, that takes a time to process, and you have to sort of relax and give yourself the time to show your character going through these different steps. Um, and so I think coupled with that, I'd say another good advice is keep it keep it simple. Um, so don't try to have a shot, like don't try to cram 30 different emotions or a bunch of different ideas into one shot or one 10-second thing. Like just focus on doing one thing and doing it in a simple and elegant way, and it'll go down a lot more smoothly if you're trying to sort of show off and do a lot more complicated things.
Yeah, that's kind of just answered the question right there. That was a piece of advice I think that anyone could really use.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, the last thing I wanted to ask was, do you have any tips for people who want to specifically get a job like the one that you have?
Contacts are very useful. I think if you're in school, you need to stay in touch with other students and the professors. If you are sort of self-learning, you gotta join some sort of a community where you can meet other people, because the problem is you might have a really good demo reel and be a top-notch animator, but the problem with, especially with the bigger studios, is that they receive just so many demands for jobs all the time that it's just rare that they'll actually land on your demo reel at the right moment that they need an animator. So I would say it's always better to sort of have a personal touch where you can actually contact someone within the studio or someone that you know who knows someone maybe, and try to get in touch that way.
Yeah, advice I've heard is to do that, but do it organically. Don't be too, aggressive.
Of
Otherwise, you
course,
might actually push people away rather than,
for sure.
getting closer to
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying. I mean, like, never go in like I don't
Give
think
me
you
a
should.
job.
You're right. Never go in with the mindset of like I'm only talking to this person because I want to work where they work. Because I think it just is going to show in the way you're acting, and it can. I mean, it's a little psychopathic when you think about it. It doesn't very, um, very nice thing to do. So I would just say no. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like you keep in mind that jobs aren't just got you don't just get them. Um, Purely because of your skill. And that's just not how the world works. It's also because you are a nice person and you're someone who's enjoyable to work with and pleasant. And if you're that on top of being a really good animator, then it's gonna be the golden ticket. Not just your skills. Because if you're really good, but you're also kind of a douchebag, and then people don't want to hire you, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I would say everyone says that, and it's true because everyone I've worked with has always been a perfectly normal, nice person,
Right.
and I've never met anyone that's been, not nice
Right.
so
Right.
far
Right.
in the
So
animation industry.
it's I mean I've heard stories of people who aren't necessarily the nicest or whatever, and usually doesn't end up well, and it's a small world. The animation industry isn't actually all that big. A lot of people know each other, and your reputation is kind of important, and if it gets tarnished, then it's hard to scrub clean again, so you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah. Well, here we are, arriving at the end of my list of questions.
Dang, all right.
So
Well,
that was it.
that was a good list, man.
Anything you want to shout out, Mr. Famous Animator?
Uh, well, before you called me, I mean, I think, and if anybody's listening to this podcast, they've probably seen this already. But if before you called me, I was rewatching Love, Death and Robots, the Netflix series, and it's just in terms of pushing the boundaries of animation and what it means for the animation industry. That series specifically is really good. So, if you haven't seen it yet, people should go see that. And I think season 2 is in the works, so I'm really excited for that as well.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
I
no
appreciate
problem,
it.
man.
It was really
Thanks for
cool.
having me.